Hello, my name is Nicolas. I'm one of the co-authors of this lifecycle biodiversity impact tool we developed as part of the Donut for Urban Development project. And I'm here to give you a little tour of the tool, starting with the simpler version of the tool. So you can find it on the home.earth website here. What do you find in this tool then? So briefly, this is a tool that allows you to calculate your project's impact on biodiversity, both due to the use of land on your project area and the use of materials and energy throughout your project's lifecycle. Here you have an introduction tab that gives you overall information about the tool. First of all, some information about the purpose of the tool. Also, a link to a complementary tool here, the biodiversity metric tool, which will allow you to make a more thorough assessment of only on-site impacts, if that's what you're interested in. So this is not something that we developed. It is from Natural England, but it is freely available and might be of interest to you. Now, what do we have in this tool? First, we have background environmental data about biodiversity impacts linked with different types of land use and the production, use, and disposal of various materials and heat and electricity. So if you go to the Data Land tab, you will find coefficients that link the transformation of land from one type to another and the occupation of land to impacts on biodiversity here. So the transformation coefficients represent the impact of transforming transforming a land use type, so from one type to another. It's a one-time impact. The occupation coefficients represent the impact of not allowing the land to come back to a natural state. So these are impacts over time that are linked with, the occupation of land over time. The Data Materials tab will, on the other hand, include the impacts of the production, use, and disposal of various materials. On the left here, you have environmental impacts, biodiversity impacts, linked with various processes. Here we use processes from the Ecoinvent database. We're not affiliated with Ecoinvent, but we are using it because the data is available and widely used. Now, we are not allowed to publish that data for licensing reason. So it's very important to note that when you first open the tool, all the data you will find here is dummy data. It's not real values. It's not accurate. It's only numbers that we added here so that you can see how the tool works, so that if you don't have access to environmental data, you can still try to input some values in the tool to see how it works, to get some figures, to get some results. But I really need to stress that these are not real values, and so you should not use them to perform actual calculations to get actual results. What you should do, if you have an Ecoinvent license, you can go to the Ecoinvent website to purchase a license or to access the data. Click on Login Database here. You will eventually reach this page, the Eco Query tool from Ecoinvent. It allows you to download environmental data from the database, either by searching for different processes here on the database search tab, or by downloading the entire Ecoinvent database. So here we use the LCIA cutoff database, and you can download it here. This second link here should provide you with the data you need. So by downloading the data in a spreadsheet, you will be able to easily find the values you need simply by following the text here. So you simply find the recipe 2016 endpoint H stands for hierarchical, and the indicator category total ecosystem quality for each of these processes, and you input the value here. As mentioned here, unless the structure of the spreadsheet changes somehow, you should be looking for column SJ in the spreadsheet you downloaded from Ecoinvent. On the right here, we have a table of common construction products and materials, and you can see that their impact on biodiversity is calculated here based on the values found in the other table. So if you update the values in the left table, the biodiversity impact for all of these construction products will be automatically updated. All of this is for the background data. So this is something that you will need to do the first time you open the tool, but it should be a one-time change, not something that you have to do every single time. Then, how do you actually use this tool to perform calculations? You go to the Input tab, and here you will find two boxes, on-site impacts and off-site impacts. On the on-site impacts box, you enter the study period, which should be the same study period as is commonly used in life cycle assessment in your country. It's usually 50 or 60 years. In Denmark, it's 50, so that's the value I've entered here. And here you enter the types of land on your project area before the project and after the project. Based on these values and the background data we saw in the Data Land tab, the tool will calculate impact on biodiversity from land use on your project area. Here you have a clarification of what these different land use types actually mean. On the right here, you need to enter the amounts of various construction materials used in your project, including amounts needed for replacement and renovation during the study period, so during these 50 years. So in the simple tool, you have to do this manually, meaning that, as indicated here, if you have 1 ton of facing tiles with a service life of 40 years, but the study period is 50, then the amount you should enter in the table is 2 tons, not 1 ton, because the tiles will be replaced once during the study period. So for each of these construction products, you can pick the units that you want to use to enter the amounts. So usually you can pick between kilograms and cubic meters. If you do not pick the same value as in preferred units, the tool will use some assumptions about density to convert one into the other. So it's always better to use this preferred unit because it skips one conversion step, which might introduce additional errors. And finally here, you enter the yearly use of heat and electricity in your buildings. So the total use, which means that you don't enter values per square meter, you enter values for the total project, but the use per year, not for the entire study period. In Electricity Expert here, you enter the amount of electricity that is produced on your project area. If you have solar panels, for instance, other kinds of local electricity production installations, in excess of your local needs, so only the amount that is exported to the grid. So all of these are the input values for the tool. Now, what do the outputs look like? Well, I will switch to another file so that you can see what it looks like when we have entered values. So here I have simply entered some values based on rough estimates for an actual case. As you can see, when we switch to the Results tab, here we can first see on this green table the impact on biodiversity from local land use on the project area. The negative values mean that there is a positive impact on biodiversity. The positive values mean that there is a negative impact on biodiversity because these are species lost. So yeah, a positive number in species lost is quote unquote a bad thing. A negative number is a good thing. So here it simply means that previously on the project area, we had, for instance, used forest exploited for timber production. And the amount of forest exploited for timber production has been reduced. This is linked with a good impact on biodiversity because forest used for timber production has a lower value for biodiversity than virgin forest and natural unexploited areas. On the other hand, we can see that the amount of the area of unexploited forest has been decreased. The area of urban land has, of course, thoroughly increased, and both of these changes are linked with positive values in this table, so negative impacts on biodiversity. Further down in this blue table, you can see the impacts of all these construction products on biodiversity over the entire study period. You can sort this table by clicking on these little arrows. So, for instance, you can sort it here so that you can see the highest contribution first, or you can sort it by material type. If you scroll down, you can also see a summary per material type on this light blue table. Here on the right, you can see the impact of energy use during the study period and a summary of the contributions from land use, energy use, and the use of materials. The tool also produces some charts, and as you can see, in this particular project, the local land use actually contributes for roughly 5% of the total biodiversity impact only, where energy use during the study period contributes for about 35%, and material use contributes for about 60%, with wood products in this particular project having the highest contribution to biodiversity impact. This is just a rough example, and we don't claim that this is representative of the typical breakdown of biodiversity impacts for a development project, but it does illustrate that at least in some cases, most of the impact on biodiversity is to be found off-site from energy use and the use of materials. Finally, you can also convert traditional LCA results into an impact on biodiversity using this LCA conversion factors tab. The idea here is that you can use common so-called midpoint LCA impact categories, which mean LCA impacts on global warming, on toxicity, on eutrophication, and so on. You can convert all these LCA impacts into an impact on biodiversity. The advantages of this approach are first that these conversion factors here are open source. They are publicly available, so you actually don't need to resort to a third-party database to purchase Ecoinvent data to do this conversion. And it is a lot simpler. It is a lot more specific and representative to your project as well. The main downside is that it is actually quite rare to have LCA results already that include all of these relevant categories. In particular, land use is a very important one, in particular for biogenic products, and is often missing in common building LCA tools. So if you happen to have LCA results that cover all of these categories, you can use this tab to convert your LCA results into impacts on biodiversity for materials and energy, but you will still need to calculate the impact of local land use separately. And finally, here you have a tab where we just copied the terms of the GNU license, GPL license for this tool. Essentially, the license means that this is an open source tool. You are allowed to distribute and modify it, but any modification and further distribution you make to the tool also needs to be open source under the same license. Now we can take a look at the detailed version of the tool. So the detailed version of the tool has a lot in common with the simple one, but there are very important changes as well. In the detailed version of the tool, you will find roughly the same introduction and the same background environmental data. The Ecoinvent data that you need to download and insert, it is the exact same table, but found in a tab called Background Env Data. The land use data that I showed you earlier, as well as the calculated biodiversity impacts for all these construction products, are found in the Data tab. These are otherwise the exact same tables, as in the simple tool. Now, the data entry in this version of the tool is very different. The data on local land use and on energy use is similar, so all of this should look familiar. It is the exact same interface as in the simple tool, barring that some boxes have been moved around. But for building materials, it is very different. For building materials, you have a separate tab, and you need to enter these materials as a breakdown of materials in different levels. So I will explain this further. Your entire building, your entire bill of materials for the building is broken down into elements, which are made of sub-elements, which are made of constructions, which are made of products, like this. It is a breakdown in these 4 different levels. This breakdown is commonly used in LCA-Bug, the Danish building LCA tool, and this is why we used it here as well. It's a quite convenient solution. It's a quite familiar one. But what you need to do here is to enter each element, then under an element, each sub-element, and for each sub-element, all the constructions, for each construction, all the products. I will show you an example in which I entered all of these values so you can see what it looks like. Here you can see that the first element I entered was the roof of the building. So we know that the roof is made up of a single sub-element, also called roof. The sub-element called roof is made up of a single construction, and this construction is made up of these 6 products. But if we scroll down a bit, for instance, we see here that the ground floor slabs sub-element is made up of 3 different constructions, each of these constructions made up of several products. The important thing is that the values entered for each product are values per unit of construction. So we can see here that the wet room floor includes 120 kilogram of cement screed per square meter. And so the total material amount will be this value multiplied by the 546 square meter of wet room floor. Here as well, the number of replacements is calculated automatically based on the service life value you enter here. So compared with the simple tool, the data entry is a bit different. In the simple tool, you would simply enter the total material amount for the entire building, and you would have to include the amount of materials in replacements manually. Here you enter the material amount not for the entire building, but only per unit of your construction, and you enter the service life, and the total material amount is calculated automatically. All of these informations, by the way, you will find repeated in this little help box on the right of the spreadsheet. Now, the way the data entry works in practice is that in the first column, you select from a drop-down list whether this row will be an element, a sub-element, a construction, or a product. Once you have selected the type of level for your row, the name in column B is selected by double-clicking on it. So I double-click on this cell. It opens a menu where I can select my my elements and sub-elements from a list. I already have external walls. Let's pick another one. For sub-elements, it works just the same. The list of sub-elements you will be offered depends on the element you have above. So here I'm only offered a choice of different foundations because I'm under the element foundations. For constructions, the name is actually user-defined. So you can just write whatever you want there. It is also up to you to define the units that you will express your construction in and the amount of this construction. So for instance, looking at the other example here, you can see that the developer who provided this data chose to express the value per square meter for the wet room floor, so entered 546 square meters and then entered values per square meter for each product. But for the other constructions here, floor construction for instance, only entered one piece, one unit, and then entered total material amounts for the entire building under the construction. So that is entirely up to you. The two options are valid. Here, let's say that I will enter 1000 square meters. You can see also that the cells are yellow if data is missing. So it reminds you if you need to enter data. And then under construction, I can enter product. Products, again, are selected by double-clicking on a cell and selecting them from a drop-down list. So I will add some concrete. And here you can see that it is automatically selecting the units per unit of construction. So the amount of concrete is entered in cubic meters. And so here I am entering cubic meters of concrete per square meter of foundations. And I need to enter the service life as well. So let me enter an arbitrary value here and the service life. And so on, adding products down the line. It is sometimes easier or faster to copy-paste some rows, for instance, copy-paste multiple product rows to reduce the amounts of time you need to select values in a drop-down list. This should not break the calculation, fingers crossed, but I have found it to be faster. Now, as you can see, there are values that remain empty. This is because the tool does not update cells automatically, but only does so when you click this Update Calculation button on the top right. So when I click it, now it has calculated the amount of replacement for each product, the total material amount, and the related impact on biodiversity here. So again, looking at a more thorough example, you can see here that we have the biodiversity impact for the building as a whole, and then for each element, and then for each sub-element. So a breakdown of the biodiversity impact here. For instance, we can see that the stairs contribute for 2.7 to the power minus 3 species year, and the vast majority of that comes from indoor stairs, and outdoor stairs have a small contribution. You have a separate tab for results where you can see again a breakdown of biodiversity impacts here per element. So how much of the impact comes from the roof, from the foundations, from the external and internal walls, and so on. Here a breakdown by sub-elements. Here a breakdown by material types, where we can see, for instance, that wood has the highest contribution in this building. And here a breakdown by product, so the construction products used in your building, from highest contribution to lowest. Here a breakdown by construction, and you can actually select one construction. So you have this cell called choose a construction, and you simply need to double click once again next to it. Choose one of your construction, for instance, interior doors, and it automatically gives you the products that make up this construction and the related biodiversity impacts for these products. Here you have the species lost from direct land use. This is the exact same table as in the simple tool, and the exact same calculation. Species lost from the use of electricity and heat. This is also the same table as in the simple tool, and again a summary of the contribution of local land use, materials, and operational energy. Now again, these values are not calculated automatically. Initially this tab is quite empty, and you need to click update results for the values to show up. So with the little example I added earlier, you can see that now it just added a row for the foundations. In the charts tab, you also have various charts, and once again they do not update automatically. You need to click update charts for values to show up there. So if I show you again on the other example, you can see that we have a chart that helps you visualize which element of your building contributes for the highest impact on biodiversity. Here that would be the ground floor slabs. Again, which constructions contribute with the highest impact. That would be the floor constructions. In terms of land use, it is now the use of, well, the fact that the project area was turned into urban land that contributes to the highest impact on biodiversity. Your sub-elements here, again, ground floor slabs, have the highest contribution. An overview of the impacts from land use, materials, and operational energy. An overview per material type, where here you can see that wood has the highest contribution. And in terms of single products, softwood has the highest contribution in this particular building. The central chart here depends on the construction that you selected here. You can see actually that I selected interior door here, but the chart still says roof, and that's because I have not updated the charts. Now it is a chart for interior doors. So as you can see, the detailed tool provides a lot more, a lot finer breakdowns of results into elements, constructions, products, material types, and so on. It automatically calculates material amounts from replacements as well. It has a lot of neat features. It is also more complex to use, so it requires a little bit of getting used to. That's it for now. This tool is expected to be only a first step into integrating a better consideration of biodiversity into our assessment tools for development projects, into our LCA tools that are becoming more and more widely used. So we are seeing this as a first attempt, as a way of breaking ground. And there's a lot of room for improvement, but this is essentially a beta version. So we very much welcome your questions and comments and feedback. You are very welcome to contact us at this address. Thank you for your attention, and we hope that this helps you better take into account your project's impact on biodiversity.